Bentornati! Welcome back to the final episode of Cataclysm: Dark Changes Ahead. Yes, you've heard it right, it's the final episode. This would have been the show in which we take a look at this past week's changelog and discuss the evolution of the game in terms of game design, and it's going to be, in part. Long story short, I wasn't able to look at more than 2 days worth of changes in a couple of hours, so it's not going to be a full week of changelog. Before I start discussing this partial change list though, I want to spend a few minutes explaining why this is unfeasible and why I think this is not just a problem for this series or my personal schedule, but for CDDA as a whole. If you're not interested in me rambling, feel free to skip ahead, I'll provide time codes in the description. So what's the problem? Well, I start reading the descriptions and comments on the various code branches that were eventually merged during the past week. Merged means they became part of the experimental branch, so they were accepted. And I see this pattern emerge again and again. 1. A lot of contributors keep adding content or tweaking existing content seemingly outside of any sort of unified effort or shared goal. This includes things like new recipes, recipe tweaks, stats rebalances, and so on, where I would like to see a concerted effort. Something like, yeah, let's open this thing where we rebalance all leather armor, for example, and we decide what the principles are, and we go about implementing it. I don't see anything like that. 2. I see more and more features being developed before any modicum of agreement has been reached, even just at the design level. So, many times this includes having multiple developers trying to solve the exact same problem in different ways, or using these different systems, or even designing entire new systems from scratch where existing ones could have been reused or tweaked or expanded. It also means that it's not infrequent to read comments where the devs and contributors argue about these things, not on the basis of some central design idea again, but merely on the basis of what they personally like and don't like. And 3, I see more and more very complicated systems being designed where I strongly suspect a simplification would have been beneficial to the overall game experience to begin with. Now you might be tempted to say, what did you expect, Onion? This is just the nature of an open source game. Well, I expected to be able to at least quickly skim and evaluate a week's worth of accepted and merged code changes in a reasonable amount of time. And there's a reason why I think that would be good. If I can't in a few hours at least make a mental list of the changes, how can it be possible for anybody to actually go through them and assess each of those changes in detail to make sure that they are beneficial to the game and follow any kind of design? And you also have to look at the code. Just asking people, oh, you need to test this, you need to at least load the game and test it, or you need to make sure that the automated tests run, that's not enough. We're talking about a game where everything you change can have so many repercussions, so many implications. If there is this many changes with this little discussion about each of those changes, how can they be good in the end? How can the combination of all of this be good at the end? Basically, I have a strong feeling they're just adding everything into the mix with not enough care. But then again, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm slow. Maybe I would never be able to do it, but they can. Anyway, I would like to spend now one more minute looking at Conway's Law. Conway's Law states that any organization that designs a system, defined broadly, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. This is important, as I feel this organization, if you can call it that, doesn't communicate nearly as much as it would be necessary to create a cohesive software artifact. And that's the underlying reason why we risk ending up with a game that looks like a huge pile of loosely connected, when not entirely unrelated, features. If a central design exists, and if someone is making an effort to protect and develop that idea by communicating it to the contributor and making sure they all communicate with each other before adding or removing pieces from it, well, I'm not seeing it. And this makes me sad and pessimistic. I want to like this game. I want to like the people that make it. I can't keep reading the stuff because it makes me mad, and that's not what I want from my Saturday mornings. Anyway, enough of me rambling. In the end, I still love CDDA. I still love all the people that work on it. It's just that it rubs my nerves raw. Anyway, let's try and take a look at some of the features, shall we? Apparently, from now on, there will be a full list of the applicable weapons when you select a martial art, which is cool. Then, there is this change that makes it so when defining recipes and items, the content creators can specify this thing is made of various materials, but also the proportion of those materials. So if something is made 9 out of 10 parts cotton instead of half and half cotton and plastic, but it's 9:1, then the characteristics of that piece of equipment will reflect this proportion. And this relates to armor resistance, the base material, flammability, energy absorption, salvaging, byproducts from burning, and also, I think this is very interesting, magnetic pull. So if you have something that is 90% wood and only 10% metal, the magnetic pull would be only 10% as effective. And I think this is probably the most important change in this. Again, like, this would warrant talking about this a lot. We just can't do it. This was probably one of the best pull requests in this entire bunch. Add a booming voice trait that increases yelling volume. It would be now tied to the what's the hobby? Public speaking. If you're a public speaker, you yell at 10 plus 10 sound level, I guess. Interesting. Okay, there's now the possibility in the code, not necessarily in the game yet, to have an effect or to activate something that can pull enemies towards you, and this is a quick demonstration in this video. Sorry, I have to rewind this. So this would be a character activating a mutation and pulling another creature towards them, and I think this should be now applied, or at least the purpose of this is to apply it to stuff like the frog mutation. Then there was a problem when creating characters. If you tabbed back all the way to the scenario selection, all current data about the character would be lost. This should fix that. Then magicalism. We have staves not being flimsy or brittle anymore, because they decided that they are more like this than this. If you play magicalism, I guess that's gonna be good for you, because you can use your staff to pummel zombies in the head. Also made dragon books spawn in more locations. Apparently those dragon books were not added in loot pools at all. Stop the game from interfering with other programs' input after losing focus. So good news, if you use a Swedish or Finnish keyboard, now you can type when there is a CDDA open in the background. Looks like a bunch of recipes were adjusted or corrected, it seems, in terms of, well, the container can only hold so much, so the ingredients can't be this much, or if you use this much of starting ingredients, you can't get with this much of end product. Stuff like that. I don't know how much this helps or hinders play, to be honest. And it would be very hard to gauge based on the description. Anyway. Weariness and sleep. This seems like an attempt to balance those weird interactions between, well, weariness and sleep. I think you probably noticed this in the experimental, where sometimes you go to sleep and you don't seem to recover your tiredness, like, at all. So I think this is a first attempt at fixing that. Somebody took it on themselves to develop embrasures. If you're not sure what an embrasure is, it's this, also called arrow slits. So it means a wall that's impassable and you can't do melee through it, but you can shoot or do reach attacks to it. Seems interesting. Have you noticed how a lot of pills spawn without bottles? Now they have bottles. There's apparently a bunch of in-depth discussions about gambesons and how much do they cover the legs and stuff like that. So look out for changes in gambesons. Remember in the last episode when I said that we have too many cooking recipes? Well, now there's a bunch of recipes to make food with blood. And also eggs. Egg salad sandwich. Remember what I said, would be much better if you could just say you can make sandwiches, and this is the list of all the possible ingredients you can use in a sandwich. You can use egg salad. You know what that makes? Egg salad sandwich. You don't need to add a separate sandwich recipe for everything, because that makes the crafting menu impossible. Anyway, we have more chaos. Okay, this is interesting. This is a reworking, rebalance of some of the flags added by mutations, and this specifically relates to the ability to eat poisonous food, or to eat zombie meat, or to eat mutant meat. Apparently this got a little bit more squished together, so that when you get the first trait, you are able to eat, I think, dead meat, and then you can eat all mutant meat. Or maybe it's the other way around. So maybe you first get the ability to eat toxic meat, which would be the mutant meat, and then you can also eat zombie meat. And this, by the way, applies to things like the mouse mutation or the raptor mutation, stuff that normally get saprovore and traits like that. So in the end, they agree that this is for role-playing purposes, because this will only arrive for a character very late in the game, and by that time you're not really hurting for food. So I don't know, it's a thing. Okay, here we have a big change, which means also a spiraling of subsequent attempts at balancing this. But basically we're gonna have another hidden stat, apart from health, which is cardio. It means how fit you are, and that should also affect, well, in turn should affect your health, should affect your maximum stamina, should affect your stamina regen, and stuff like that. So this is the first implementation. The full description is in here, apparently. It's got fancy pictures, so it must be a good feature. Introduce a new hidden stat, cardio. And I mean, this should tell you everything, right? I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about hidden stats and the accompanying formulas, and why I think they should be used very, very sparingly. I'll base my argument on an example. Ultima Online. If you're not aware, Ultima Online is regarded by most people as the first MMORPG. At launch, Ultima Online included a very complex simulation of virtual ecology. The carnivores would spawn in small numbers on mountains and slowly seek out herbivores to eat. The herbivores would seek and eat grass, and grass needed time to replenish after it was eaten. In turn, the herbivore and carnivore populations would ebb and flow proportionally to how much food they had consumed. It was well balanced and the developers were really happy with it. They said it was great to watch these populations of animals evolve naturally. There was a big problem with all of this though, as you probably already can imagine. Players swarmed the servers in such big numbers that animals were killed practically the second they spawned. Eventually, not only the game had to be instanced into multiple servers, but the entire codebase for the virtual ecology was removed in favor of static spawners. Now, while this is primarily a lesson on how do you test an MMORPG and that you have to account for a large number of players, it also tells you something about hidden complexity. The problem with hidden complexity and hidden stats is exactly that they are hidden. Ultima Online players never even knew there was a virtual ecology system in place, because animals never lived long enough for them to notice in the first place, of course. If anybody noticed a herbivore making a long grass tile turning into a short grass tile, they probably thought it was a neat visual trick and nothing more. To the players, there had never been any evidence of the existence of that system, so in the end, a simple static spawner was exactly the same from the player's point of view. So, hidden stats, complicated formulas, sure, sometimes there's a place for those, but I'd rather have something that I can interact with. If in the end, we as players can't get the evidence of how a system works, or in other words, if a meaningful feedback loop is not established at design level, all of that complexity is for nothing. Basic appliance implementation. This is the first release of this thing, which is, hey, let's try and use the vehicle code to create or to implement the ability to create stationary infrastructures that can have power grids, plumbing, gas lines, etc., and that you can use to, well, power appliances in your base. Anyway, let's not delve into this too much, also because it's gonna be a long time before it comes out fully. Group training seminars. Looks like we will be able, in the case you have multiple NPCs, to ask an NPC to say, well, you're good at this skill, why don't you give a seminar right now? And you can select who should attend the seminar, and you go ahead with that, and multiple NPCs or even you in the mix can learn that skill. You can also run a seminar yourself and teach a bunch of NPCs something. Worth noting, in the middle here chimes in another contributor saying, well, this creates near instantaneous training that is not realistic. We don't really like that. The current training is also practically useless at the higher levels due to how little skill XP it gives versus how much is needed to level up. My solution to teaching NPC skills is letting them work on practice recipes. I thought that was really insightful because we now have this separation between theoretical knowledge and practice, and this system when you can work on practice recipes so that you can, well, level up through practice recipes, and letting NPCs work on practice recipes seems like a really clever way to plug into the same system that has already been designed to manage NPCs, and that also kind of reduces the complexity of the entire thing. because you already have activities. You can say, oh, this is an activity zone where the NPCs will do X. Well, why not set up an activity zone where NPCs will train by crafting this practice recipe over and over again, or until the materials run out. That would have been really clever, in my opinion. But again, we go back to this. An organization whose communication structure is extremely loose will produce a system that is a collection of very loose features. Alright, that said, I still love you, everybody. I love all the contributors. I love the game. So, what else remains to say? If not, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again on the channel, but there won't be another episode. Alla prossima!